Well, we can actually start that Calipari discussion now, because what is making Kentucky fans so mad is that they are not getting to these games.
Yeah.
They're not getting to the point where they're playing equal talent teams and then let the chips fall where they may.
Right. And that's kind of where this whole discourse goes to, is that a round of 64 exit is different than a round of 32 exit, than a Sweet 16 exit. And the round of 34 exit, you can excuse it. Like you said with Bruce Pearl, nobody's mad at Bruce right now in terms of a long-term fit at Auburn. People are mad at John Calipari because it's happened 2 out of 3 years. They've had very little success over the last 4 to 5 years in the NCAA tournament period. I mean, the one win is not going to carry them in this conversation of blue bloods. So, yeah, things for Calipari have heated up because he's not in a position where anyone he loses to, you think, yeah, that loss makes sense. When you can't make sense of the results, that's when the coach starts to get in trouble.
Yeah, and okay, so here's the Calipari situation as we know it now. Matt Jones from Kentucky Sports Radio, probably the most plugged-in guy covering Kentucky. He talked about it over the weekend. He had a Twitter space on Sunday night, and he said basically they need to make a decision. They were a little surprised. It sounds like the Kentucky administration was a little bit surprised at how angry everyone was, at how many people are out on Cal, and they have to choose. Now, the video that we did on Friday, James, got passed around a lot, where I talked about the buyout math, where it's $33 million. It sounds like a ton of money. It is a ton of money, but if things break the right way, it's not that much, because he has an offset. He could get another job, and it's also not due a bunch up front. It's all doing equal installments till 2029. So it's a doable thing for an SEC program that has a lot of money. The question is, do they want to do it? If you've not yet figured out how you're going to watch, if you're a cord cutter and you want to know how to watch, Prime Video has you covered. Watch every game live on your phone, on your laptop, or at home with Prime Video. You subscribe to Prime Video, you do the add-on for Max and Paramount Plus, and they give you access to all the games within one app, one password. You're good to go. And oh yeah, the new Roadhouse is in there too. New Roadhouse just hit Prime Video. Jake Gyllenhaal, he's the new Dalton. It's in the Keys. Come on. You know you want to. And look at these games. Look at these games in the Sweet 16. Duke, Houston, Illinois, Iowa State, North Carolina, Alabama, UConn, San Diego State. 2 teams who were in the Final Four last year. Gonzaga, Purdue. You know you want to. So sign up for Prime Video. Hit the link in the show description. And the discourse over the weekend was very interesting to me, and I'm sure you saw a lot of it too.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people understand how coaching changes work, and especially Kentucky, where if you think about it, Cal's been the coach there since 2009. Mark Stoops has been their football coach since 2013. They have not been on the coaching change roller coaster nearly as frequently as people who follow other schools. So, like, how coaching changes work now, it's not the same. Because I saw a lot of, well, if you fire Cal, then all the recruits are going to leave. And I'm like, well, of course.
Yeah.
The new coach is going to want to bring in his own players anyway.
Right. Yeah. And the discourse with Kentucky has been floated out there. It's been talked about a lot. For me, when I hear that the administration was surprised by the fans' reaction, when I hear things like they're considering it over a long period of time, they'll have a decision in the next few days, that tends to suggest to me that there is a real hesitance to pull the trigger on anything, which then in turn suggests to me that this John Calipari leaving Kentucky deal is not the most likely outcome here if you're talking about what we think Mitch Barnhart is going to decide in the coming days. Because at the point that you start putting in qualifiers, I think that's when you start to show what your opinion is on different things. So when there is this kind of discourse, when people are back and forth with it, that tends to suggest to me that the guy who has not only a big buyout, but a long history with that team, you mentioned going all the way back to 2009, that sounds to me like a a real hard conversation in the office where it's understood that this is the year that you better get it done. And I know that's going to make a lot of Kentucky fans roll their eyes because that was supposed to be this year. That was kind of what the fans set as the expectation for this season was you get it done this year or else with this group.
Now, here's my question. If they decide to keep him, because I've been thinking about this over the weekend too. If they decide to keep him, like normally you don't announce that your coach is coming back next year. Like he just comes back. Like everybody, like nobody's announcing that Bruce Pearl is coming back at Auburn. Nobody's announcing that Todd Golden is coming back at Florida. Like they're just back because they're not on the hot seat. But at this point, if you decide to keep Cal, do you have to say something?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to explain why?
100% you have to say something. And I think you have to set the expectation too. I think if Mitch Barnhart wants to keep John Calipari around, he's got to come out with a statement, whether it's a press conference or putting it out on Twitter, in a press release, whatever he wants to do. He has got to send a message to fans that the expectation has been set and that they are taking real tangible goals towards fixing the program. Because if not, there is going to be what we talked about. There is going to be uproar, not only on the message boards, not only on social media, but there is going to be a disgruntled fan base in the arena. And as you said, that's when they stop donating. And they can't have that. So there's got to be a call to arms here where they tell the fan base, look, you want this program to succeed. We want this program to succeed. If John Calipari is going to be the coach who leads it, we need those donations. So we need you one more year to do this. And then if he doesn't live up to the expectations, then we'll get to that point that everyone seems to be at right now.
Yeah, and that will be an interesting, because you have to be very careful how you word that, how you handle that, because you don't want to go in with an apathetic fan base. And I think the thing is, Calipari recruits well enough that they'll come around in the offseason. They'll be able to get excited about next year's team. Now, if it starts out poorly, maybe they have a little bigger problem, but they can get excited if that's what happens. But I still, like, the longer this goes, you think it's, the longer it goes, the more it heads toward Cal coming back. I think the longer it goes, the more it heads toward Cal not coming back, because it's not football. Like football, you have to make the decision now, because of the way the season works. Like you have to fire the person right after the season ends if you're going to make a change at all. Otherwise, you've missed your window. Like in basketball, you've got some time. You've got a few weeks where you can let let it breathe, talk to your major stakeholders, figure out what you need to do. And I think I was texting with Matt Jones about this over the weekend. He disagrees with me. He says if you're gonna decide on Cal, you decide on Cal, whether or not you've got somebody lined up. And I realize I keep going back to the Texas A&M football stuff, but that is probably the closest parallel here with Jimbo Fisher and John Calipari. When they made the decision on Jimbo Fisher, they did not have anybody lined up. They did not. They had a list, but they did not have someone who said, I will take this job. I'm waiting in the wings. And ironically, ended up they almost hired Mark Stoops away from Kentucky. But Matt thinks you make the decision on Cal regardless of whether you have somebody with a conditional yes. I think you should have a conditional yes from somebody before you commit to that buyout. Like you should know you have, and I am completely giving you a hypothetical here because I don't have any inside information on any of these people, nor do I know if they'd come, like a Brad Stevens or a Billy Donovan or somebody like that, where there's going to be a splash and immediately everybody's gonna be like, oh, I'm not worried about the buyout anymore. Let's go. Like, that's happening, then it takes the sting out of committing all that money. But if you don't know that, well, if you bring Cal back another year, you're going to have good players. And if you have good players, there's a chance you could have a good run.
And that's where the timing of this is going to get real tricky, because you can't just let the fans just hang out there and wonder what's going to happen. You've got to make a decision on Cal pretty soon before the fan base gets even more upset with this whole situation. Because the last thing you want, if you're Mitch Barnhart, is to lose support from the fan base towards you. Like they're out on Calipari Mitch Barnhart can't afford to have them turn on him based on what he decides or the process that he goes through here. So I think that's where, like you said, it gets real hard because a Brad Stevens or Billy Donovan, well, they've got the NBA season to play out. That's not going to get done for the Bulls until at least mid-April. For Brad Stevens, that could go all the way into June.
Yeah.
So
it could be a college coach too. Like,
right.
Yeah,
well,
we keep throwing Nate Oates' name out there. I don't think Nate Oates is an option because he just redid his deal at Alabama. He's a $12 million buyout. Like, you attach that giant buyout to get him on top of the buyout to fire Cal. I think that becomes financially prohibitive. So there are college coaches, obviously, that would take Kentucky. This is one of those, like, I always tell the people on the football side, like, you watched Lincoln Riley leave Oklahoma for USC. You watched Brian Kelly leave Notre Dame for LSU. Kentucky is that level of program in basketball. Somebody would leave. And that was another interesting thing with the discourse among the fans over the weekend, them saying, well, if we fire Cal, who's going to want to come here? I'm like, everybody's going to want to come. It's Kentucky, for God's sake.
Yeah, and that's where even those coaches in the college ranks, a lot of them who Kentucky would be looking at still in the tournament. You look at Nate Oates still in the tournament. I know that we've kind of ruled him out for the time being, unless some booster steps up and just decides they have to have Nate Oates, and Nate Oates comes to some decision that he wants to be there. I think he's probably out of the picture. But even a Dan Hurley, like, who doesn't want a piece of Dan Hurley right now at UConn? So if UConn makes it all the way to the championship, we're still talking about mid-April before you're able to get to him. So it's just, the timeline is going to be the hardest thing for Mitch Barnhart to navigate here, because you got to keep the fans happy. You've got to have some kind of vision. You've got to have for the transfer portal. I mean, that's what they need. They need to add transfers. But if the transfers don't know who's going to be the coach, nobody's going to be taking official visits there. Nobody's going to be signing on to play for them until it's all resolved. So they've got to get this figured out as quickly as possible to set up next year's team and the future of the program, whatever that path is.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.